Well, Alice is there. She's doing a Sunday afternoon. And I'm here to explain you a bit technically what we are doing together and why in those 3 lessons you see her in some moments to be, can't say confused, but yeah, as if she had some fog in the brain while I'm asking her to do quite simple gesture to sing and to obtain something new. In the first step, as we said, she had the idea that she wanted to remain exactly as she is with her voice, just to have some more adduction into the vocal folds in some parts of the tessitura, especially into the passages, as you've heard. She has not this totally solved, so it could be useful to work on that as we are doing. Something that happened to my students and my professionals and also with beginners, it happens to me all the time, I experience that very often, is that while we get better, even slightly, even with something that seems very slight, but it has a connection and when it depends with the diaphragm connection, usually you find that your creative part and your musical part starts dreaming something different. In this case, it is correct to follow that, because it is simply that previously it couldn't imagine what it would really like to develop because it had not into the gesture. In those cases, to develop that, we have to find something more, and generally something new. Something new doesn't mean that you have to really change yourself. You just have to change what did not provide that part, that muscular connection to have an artistic flourishing of that part. And very often it is a very profound part. It doesn't talk to you directly as, okay, I would like to do that, to try to find someone to solve technically how to do that. It will never tell you that in that terms, or it has never happened to me, and for what I know, it doesn't happen like that. It happens that you have a desire unsatisfied, you have something that you can't exactly understand of mood that is not into, and you feel a little not enough free and not so plenty of yourself and of your music. So with her, at the end, we are working on something that she has never had. Never had means that in her body has never been connected with the voice. And it is the upper part of the sustain, the part exactly related to diaphragm and core, the part to intend each other that you develop very well with set rigs, but with set rigs you don't develop also the other part as she has yet. So what happens? It happens that I invent for her specific exercises. They are not the same that I did with Elena Paparusso, who she is also a mezzo-soprano, but she had something in common in what it was lacking into her technique with Alice. But she's a different person, and she had a different life, and she had a different experience of movement in her body, and Elena is a dancer, a classical dancer, Alice she is not. So all that means that Alice, yes, she's there, she's on her own all the time in the kitchen doing things, and also having a late lunch without breakfast because she was out all day and she came back starving. And okay, well, she had never used that as Elena had never used it. But since it's Alice, I have to do it in a different way because she has to sing in a different way with a different style than Elena Paparusso. And to do that, you will see into the lessons that I put very short vocalization, very precise, with a very precise rhythm. It is the way to use what we used in the in the previous lessons to be more precise into diaphragm. In the 2 lessons you will see the first lesson, okay, second, third and fourth lesson, you will see a development of the sound. In the second and the third, the sound is getting worse. And it's true, it's getting worse. It's getting worse because I'm trying to push to take away too much of a gesture that creates a stiffness and we can't develop properly the part that I want. If you imagine that to change the way of working of a muscle, if this muscle is working with a lot of strength, you can't, without giving a little more elasticity, change it something. And especially in voice, when I never work on just one movement, it's not one force. As I always say, there are two opposing each other. So I wanted to work with the sustain and changing a little the part of the sustain that wants to work. So I wanted the upper part of the sustain work more than the other part. If she puts too much pressure in the other part of the sustain to be well opposed to appoggio, she will never use that. So to use that, I have to make something that makes it impossible for her to do the vocalization and to do what I ask with the part that she usually uses. And not to solve the problem with the appoggio. So I'm really putting her in a very awkward position to develop a movement she doesn't know she can do. From outside it's very simple. From inside the brain is what the hell I have to do? Since from outside is very simple, it is possible to do it. It is possible if you don't try to realize that you want to do that, if you don't want to try to realize what you're going to obtain, because she obtains that by appoggio and this part of the sustain, not by that. And as neurology is stating, you can't imagine an action that you have not done. So before we have to create that action, and then you will have the order into the brain. That's why I push her. That's why I put her stuck, awkward, knowing perfectly that it will not be an issue, it will not be a problem, and it will be very, very easy for her body and her brain to have this new gesture. And definitely she started having. So we have to know that the sound can become worse in the first step. I always say, as for the sustain, as for copertura, in voice it's never a one-step process. It's always as minimum a two-steps process. So never stop at the first step and never get sad or unsatisfied by the first step. The first step is just to render possible to arrive to the second step. Sometimes there is a third step. Enjoy the lessons and see you on the live streaming. Now we have live streaming, so it will be on Tuesday and Friday at 2 o'clock of London time.